Number 10. Peter Parker of Earth 92100. You'd think the addition of extra arms for a Spider-Man would be an added benefit. When it happened to Peter in the 616 universe, he panicked and got rid of it with the DNA of Morbius. Understandably. But on Earth 92100, Morbius did not live long enough to help Peter, being eaten by sharks of all things. And since no one else could, Peter kinda had to just deal with it. Turns out, during a fight with Doc Ock, after Peter embraced his extra appendages, they actually give him a distinct advantage. They actually grant him much more strength and agility, and using them, he is even able to save Gwen Stacy from her demise. Unfortunately, they don't really protect him from the inheritors. Spider Limbs here sacrifices himself to save Spider-Man 2099 and Lady Spider in Spider-Man 2099 Volume 2 Number 6 in 2014. Number 9. Spider Assassin. Do you know how effective Spider-Man would actually be if he was a little less moral but still a crime fighter? Pretty effective. And while we've seen a few different examples of this, I chose to pull from What If? Spider-Man vs. Wolverine number 1, where we are introduced to Spider Assassin. In his universe, with great power comes great responsibility and greater enemies, which led this Peter of Earth 8351 to leave New York to protect his family. He joined up with Wolverine, and likely because of this friendship, he is much less opposed to sending criminals to the afterlife. He's also almost always serious, not resorting to quips and jokes to cope with situations anymore, which is reflective in his costume, which is a much darker look, especially with those black eyes. I really dig it. His web shooters have also been shown to shoot black webs in some panels, and they also include firearms. He is an effective addition to the Spider Army when it was formed, and an extremely effective Spider-Man indeed. Number 8. Spider's Man. Alright, yeah. Nope, not a fan of this one. You ever seen those videos of people finding spider nests where it's literally a swarm of spiders? Yeah, okay, imagine that, but they're superpowered and come together to take on a human form. Now you've got the terrifying Spider's Man, which, side note, that's a great name. In Spider-Geddon number 3 of 2018, we are introduced to a colony of radioactively powered spiders who consumed a high school boy by the name of Peter Parker when he fell into their enclosure at Horizon Labs. After consuming Peter, the spiders gained a sort of hive mind in Peter's image and began fighting crime in Cruel York of Earth 11580. Other than his usual Spider-Man powers and the benefits of being a swarm of spiders, the colony is also able to poison its victims with a bite, or, if they're hungry for power, devour them whole. And it's incredibly hard to actually de-life this guy, as even a single spider being alive means technically Spider's Man is also still alive and can multiply to rebuild itself.
Number 7. MCU Thor. Thor in the MCU is pretty powerful, although he still seems to be on a journey towards becoming the most powerful he can ever be within this universe. Recently, he grew quite a bit when it came to his power levels, as he was forced to find a new way to harness his power when separated from Mjolnir, which was destroyed by his sister Hela. Hela destroys Mjolnir at the beginning of Thor Ragnarok, forcing Thor to channel the power within himself, and earning him the nickname of Sparkle Fingers from the Grandmaster. Since then, Thor lost an eye but managed to protect his people against Hela and the inevitable destruction of Asgard via Ragnarok, using this prophesied end to basically defeat his sister. So although Asgard is destroyed, it lives on in Asgardians. Yay! Thor was unfortunately no match for Thanos in space, although he did actually almost defeat Thanos in Infinity War single-handedly, although yeah, I guess in the end he didn't. However, he did go on to find a home for his people under the leadership of Valkyrie on Earth, creating sort of a new Asgard, if you will. We don't know where he's off to next, but it is possible we could see him take up the mantle of leader from Valkyrie, finally accepting his own fate as the next Allfather and inevitably taking Odin's place. That is after he goes on some adventures with the Guardians of the Galaxy, I'm sure. The Asgardians of the Galaxy?
Number 6. Spider-Man 2099. Probably one of the most loved characters on this list. The Spider-Man of Earth 928, Miguel O'Hara, or as he's better known, Spider-Man of the dystopian future of 2099. This version of Spider-Man has many similar abilities to 616 Peter Parker, but some that are not so similar. He has super speed, which is actually capable of somehow creating a decoy. His spider sense allows him to telepathically communicate with others. He has accelerated vision, he has retractable talons, and also has fangs that he can use to paralyze others. And he has the famously disgusting organic spider silk spinnerets on his wrists. He first appeared as a preview in Amazing Spider-Man number 365 in June of 1992, and in his own series in Spider-Man 2099 number 1 in September 1992, and he is a titanically awesome character.
At number 5 we have Dark Claw. This is a fun one, but it's also arguably a very underestimated Wolverine variant, all things considered. For those of you who don't know Darkclaw, he's basically a combination between Wolverine and Batman. The Amalgam comics showed different heroes from the Marvel Universe merging with those of the DC Universe, and the result of Wolverine and Batman coming together is a pretty powerful new hero. There's not much more to report than the obvious, which is just that Wolverine and Batman's abilities are combined. But if you really think about it, there's only power gain for Wolverine in this amalgamation. With all the power that Wolverine already has, met with the innovative genius mind of Bruce Wayne, the possibilities for this variant are basically endless.
Number 4. Poison. From one symbiote to another. Every time that pesky Venom symbiote would try to merge with Peter Parker, he would only get halfway before Peter could repel him. Now, what happens if Peter Parker is defeated by Venom, who completely bonds with him? In the What If Spider-Man The Other story, after Peter is defeated by Morlun and cocoons himself under Brooklyn Bridge, he is offered the chance to be resurrected by the Spider God. But instead of allowing this, he refuses and is ejected from his cocoon non-resurrected. Cut to Venom, who, being Spider-Man's crazy ex-girlfriend, senses what is happening and completely ditches his current host. He intercepts Peter's body and after months of struggling, fully bonds to Peter. Now, Peter has all the fully realized powers that come with being a symbiote, but he actually has stingers that are capable of piercing the skin of Luke Cage, which is pretty insane.
Number 3. Rune King Thor. Rune King Thor, although often referred to as an alternate version of the character, is actually from the main continuity. He's more like a very distinct period in time in Thor's life, which ends up in essence getting somewhat reset. In other words, he's kind of main continuity, kind of alternate continuity. What makes him so powerful? Well, this is a version of Thor who comes to be because he's facing Ragnarok and looking for a way to stop it. He ends up gaining the power of the Odin Force and rune magic as well. He gains the Odin Force after Odin dies again. Odin has died a lot. Then there is a whole tangential reality that ends up being created where this Thor rules Earth, but I guess technically that's also like now an alternate future version of this version of Rune King Thor. So yeah. Oh boy. Anyways, this Rune King Thor would not be able to avoid Ragnarok in the end and would end up being reset as a result of all of the death that was part of that whole colossal event, along with the other gods and goddesses of Asgard. So that's why Thor isn't quite like Rune King Thor right now in the main continuity, despite this version being a part of the main continuity. Because yeah, he like lost both his eyes. So, lost both his eyes, and yet Thor, I think, is back to having both his eyes. He lost both his eyes, then he had his eyes, then he lost an eye. Does he have both of his eyes back now? I don't know. I can't keep track of how many eyes Thor has. Changes all the time.
Number 2. Ghost Spider. The last Spider-Man mashed up with other heroes, but nonetheless possibly one of the most powerful potential mashups. Also, in my opinion, the coolest looking one. Also, it appears that Uncle Ben leaving this plane of existence is actually a really good thing. See, on Earth 11638, Ben never loses his life to a mugger, and he helps train Peter with his powers and helping him form Parker Industries. Peter and Uncle Ben end up building a machine that allows Peter to lure alternate versions of Spider-Man to this reality where he absorbs their powers to increase his own. That kinda took a dark turn, didn't it? But when he tried to do this to the apparently most powerful Spider-Man from Earth 616, he is de-lifed and his soul is sent to hell, where, with the assistance of the Infernal Hulk, he is fused with the spirit of vengeance, becoming the Ghost Spider. If you know anything about Ghost Rider, you know how actually insanely powerful he is, even going toe-to-toe with Galactus at one point. So yeah, this Spider-Man / Ghost Rider guy is potentially extremely powerful. Number 1. Cosmic Spider-Man. There was a point in time when Peter Parker of Earth 616 absorbed the Enigma Force and became the most powerful version of Spider-Man we have ever seen, even capable of punching the Hulk into orbit. In the mainline continuity, he doesn't have it for very long, But on Earth 13, he kept the powers and became the hero Captain Universe. So, this Peter Parker has all the usual Spider-Man powers, but also now has cosmic awareness where he can sense things on a subatomic level and from crazy distances. He has energy manipulation, giving him energy blast and flight. He also used his abilities to manipulate matter, making his webs as strong as adamantium, or even changing their shape altogether. His universe became a safe haven for all the Spider-Men when the Inheritors were hunting them, because Captain Universe could defeat them, and his cosmic powers are gone when he leaves that dimension. Unfortunately, he is consumed by Solus, who used the life force basis of his powers against him in Amazing Spider-Man number 11 in 2014. He's still cool though.
At number 10 is Feral Wolverine. This version of the hero is not given added power by any upgrades or magical augmentation, but by his own sheer will to cause harm. What happens is that Wolverine's adamantium is ripped out by Magneto through the pores of his skin, which is, of course, very painful and traumatic. So he gets extremely angry and loses all control as he's thrown into a blind rage to get revenge on Magneto. But aside from Wolverine's pain-driven fury, Magneto actually activates a new mutation that he didn't know was being held back by the adamantium in Wolverine. And this mutation basically turns him into an animalistic version of himself that is closer to an untamed beast than his usual strategic and tactically aware self. The only downside of this version of Wolverine is that he's so unhinged that he's not able to control any strategic approach to battle. At number 9 is Helverine. When the Red Right Hand sets their sights on Wolverine, acting on their strange grudge against him specifically, they banish Logan's soul and replace it with that of a demon. So, a demonic version of Wolverine is created and makes the superhero even more powerful, sending him into a demonic rage, killing many of Logan's friends in one bloody frenzy. It takes a lot of effort for the X-Men to finally subdue Helverine, requiring the whole team alongside Jean Grey as well as Logan's own soul to battle the demon out of Wolverine's body for good. This version of Wolverine shows how strong it is in a very short time, leaving Logan's friends and us readers alike hoping that the Red Right Hand will finally just leave Logan alone. At number 8 is Laura Kinney. Laura Kinney is the result of a top secret program that makes an effort to create another Wolverine. But when they can't find a subject to survive the process of bonding the adamantium to their bones, they decide to just clone Logan himself. But during this process, the Y chromosome is damaged and they instead create a female clone that they call X-23. She only has the 2 claws on either hand, but that typically isn't a hindrance for her since she does get empowered by the Enigma Force a number of times. And if you're not already aware, the Enigma Force is what gives Captain Universe his power. So Laura is really not to be messed with. She's also just a great fighter on her own, and she eventually escapes the lab and becomes a very successful hero by her own right.
Number 7. Spider UK. The first Spider-Man mashed with another Marvel hero. These mashups always make for powerful characters. Basically, Spider UK is William Braddock, hailing from Earth 833. If you haven't gathered from the Braddock namesake, Spider UK is what would happen if Spider-Man was Captain Britain. As such, he is part of the Captain Britain Corps, being introduced in the Edge of Spider-Verse Volume 1. He is also part of the Spider Army put together to take on the Inheritors, and a pretty important part of it, he was not only an amazing leader but also had a very useful dimension hopping ability. Unfortunately, this Spider-Man didn't actually have a spider sense, which is probably what allowed him to be de-lifed by an attack from behind in Spider-Geddon number 1.
At number 6, we have Zombie Wolverine. This variant is, on its own, maybe not the most powerful out of them all, considering he's made up of decaying flesh. But due to circumstance, he actually ends up being a real issue for his friends and enemies alike. During a fight against the Silver Surfer, this version of Wolverine loses his right arm and actually has it replaced by a cybernetic one. Not only that, but Zombie Wolverine also gains cosmic powers after killing and then devouring the corpse of the Silver Surfer. So aside from an insatiable hunger as a driving force for this variant, he's also got the whole cosmic power thing on his side, as well as a nifty cybernetic arm. Beware of Zombie Wolverine, he means business.
Number 5, Jane Foster. Simply known as THOR, and for a time known in terms of her series as Mighty Thor. While we know know, this version of the character was actually Jane Foster. At first in the comics, it actually was a mystery as to who the woman behind the hammer was. Jane Foster became Thor after Thor Odinson was deemed unworthy, with the hammer actually calling out to her. This was also at a time that Jane was sick with cancer, so she had to be strong in many different ways. And it was exceedingly impressive that she decided to remain as Thor, considering the revelation that each time she transformed into the hero, her body was actually cleared of all toxins, including her chemotherapy treatments. Meaning that every time Jane became that hero, she in essence went back to square one with her treatment, making her sicker and sicker over time. Jane even chose to continue being Thor when her life was at stake, and she did end up dying, sacrificing herself to protect the world against Mangog. Fortunately, she would be resurrected by Odin afterward and become known as the hero Valkyrie, which is also like a really big moment for Jane Foster, since Odin, up to that point, never really liked Jane. He was always giving her a hard time.
At number 4, we have General James Howlett from Earth 12025. Appearing mostly in Volume 2 of Extreme X-Men, this highly decorated hero is known to be the most powerful in this reality. This version of Wolverine's bones are actually coated in adamantine, which is a mystical metal that comes from the ancient Greek gods of Olympus. The metal keeps him immune from telepathy, and it's also known to be more powerful than adamantium. Adamantine, adamantium. They're different. Adamantium, of course, being the one that the original Wolverine relies on. The adamantine is so strong that it even keeps Wolverine safe from attacks from Thor's hammer. Plus, this guy has some pretty cool titles attached to his name and is an explorer working for the government of Canada. So he just seems like a cool dude on top of everything else. Did I say dude? I meant god. He's basically a god.
Number 3. Spider-Hulk. The second Spider amalgam here. Spider-Man of the Immortal Hulk with Great Power story is granted the alter ego of the Hulk after Loki magically transferred the Gamma power to him. So it's Spider-Man's relative spider powers mixed with an unstoppable green monstrosity with the temperament of a toddler. It's actually really cool. Eventually, the power of the Hulk is switched back to Banner with the help of the Fantastic Four and Banner's own genius. It's a short little story that seems almost self-contained, but it's an insanely cool one, and a Spider-Hulk would be an incredibly powerful character if he were to show up again and had more time to hone his abilities and temper tantrums.
At number 2, we have Weapon Omega. Aside from just looking pretty cool, Weapon Omega is undoubtedly one of the most powerful variants of Wolverine in any reality. This guy has all the powers of Wolverine with the added abilities of Apocalypse. So yes, he's basically immortal and can teleport, and also use mind control, shift in size on command, and fly. Not to mention the huge blaster that's replaced one of his claw arms, and the crazy armor that he's got equipped at all times as well. Also remember, he's still got his healing abilities, even if someone did get close enough to do any damage on this guy, which I doubt is a very easy feat to accomplish, and sort of pointless considering he never dies. Weapon Omega eventually takes over for Apocalypse as leader of the Horsemen, solidifying his position as one of the most powerful variants of Wolverine in his political influence as well. Finally, at number 1, I'm putting Phoenix Force Wolverine, because there's really no comparing Phoenix Force to any other entity in terms of power, at least as far as Wolverine variants go. When possessed by Phoenix Force, Wolverine has the ability to manipulate matter at will, as well as warping reality and the fabric of the multiverse. Not to mention, if he wanted to, he could do what Dark Phoenix does and gain more power by consuming the energy of stars throughout the cosmos, if he so chooses. It's almost like his adamantium claws don't really add any extra gusta to his power set at this point, because instead of taking a stab at someone, he could just, you know, think about them being a pile of ashes and it would happen. He's such a powerful variant that he eventually reigns over the cosmos in a future alternate reality, something that old King Thor observes for himself. So yeah, Phoenix Force Wolverine at number 1.
Number 10, THROG. Starting the list off light. He might be small, but he's still pretty mighty. THROG wasn't always a frog. In fact, at one point he was a human named Simon Walterson. He ended up getting help from a witch, but after being unable to pay her, found himself transformed into a frog. Don't you hate when that happens? He befriended Thor back when he was also transformed into a frog by his brother Loki. The two teamed up to help a frog king defend against an army of rats. Simon would go on to become his own version of Frog Thor after a piece of Mjolnir was broken off. This This tiny piece was wielded by Simon, who decided to become his own version of the hero while in his frog form. As a frog, he goes by the name Puddle Gulp as well. Puddle Gulp. So if you ever see Puddle Gulp or Simon, that's THROG. Hey. Number 9. Thunderstrike. While Eric Masterson isn't more powerful than 616 Thor, he was still pretty powerful in regards to general power. He was considered worthy enough to wield Mjolnir and for a time was merged with Thor, in essence becoming that hero. However, he's probably better known for his time as Thunderstrike, when he wielded an Uru-crafted mace. He was fairly short-lived as a character, but whether he was Thor or Thunderstrike, he had powers similar to other Asgardians while in his transformed state. He was super strong, durable, tough, quick, and had a healing factor. In addition to that, with his Thunderstrike mace, he was also capable of teleportation, possibly on a multiversal level, which I think is pretty powerful. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you are loving our channel, be sure to show some love for us by heading on over to Facebook and giving us a follow over there. Number 8. War Thor. War Thor is the name that Volstagg took when he became Thor. This all went down during the time that Jane Foster was Thor and the usual 616 Thor was simply known by the name of Odinson. Volstagg became War Thor due to him seizing the Mjolnir of an alternate reality, which was unclaimed. This version of the hammer, however, seemed to have some kind of effect on his mind, as it made him, kind of violent and severe in comparison to how Thor would usually act. Probably hence his name War Thor. After light elf refugees were attacked by fire demons from Muspelheim, he ended up going to Muspelheim itself, actively taking on the whole realm in battle and threatening to wipe out all life there with a massive flood. Jane Foster as Thor was forced to fight against War Thor and eventually managed to ascertain that he was Volstagg, using her friendship with him to calm him down.
At number 7 is Lord of Vampires Wolverine. In What If number 24, Wolverine is bitten by Lord Dracula, which turns him into a vampire. And after some biting and killing as a blood-sucking ghoul, Wolverine decides he has to kill Lord Dracula and become the Lord of the Vampires himself. Then Wolverine goes and kills most of the X-Men, turning a few of them into vampires as well, and then controlling them and others with hypnosis. With his vampire army, he goes forth to take on all of New York City and then eventually the world. It's a fun, quick issue that explores an interesting question in a what-if context, but if you really take the character seriously and consider his powers, Lord of Vampires Wolverine is a very powerful variant. Wolverine is already an extremely powerful superhero, but with the ability to turn others into mindless vampires and then control them with mind powers, he becomes nearly unstoppable.
Number 6. Ultimate Thor. Ultimate Thor was an interesting version of the character. He hails from the reality of Earth 1610, and initially we were led to believe that this alternate wasn't actually even Thor, but instead was just a guy who kinda thought he was Thor and was possibly suffering from delusions, who was named Thorleif Gorman. He had a suit which helped him to fight against his enemies. Over time it would be revealed that Thorleif Gorman was indeed the latest incarnation of Thor Odinson, as memories came flooding back to him. This version of Thor wasn't as reliant on Mjolnir as some other versions of Thor are, which makes him in some ways more powerful. Also, that suit.
Number 5. The Spider of Earth 15. There are a lot of characters who go by the Spider, but specifically, I'm talking about the one that's bonded with the Carnage symbiote who comes from Earth 15. The Spider of Earth 15 is a much more sadistic, sociopathic, red-headed version of Peter Parker, which is proven by the fact that he has been sentenced to a total of 67 life sentences in prison for the crimes he has committed. To make him just a bit more lovable, he has a sense of humor very much like that of Deadpool. The Spider was introduced in Exiles number 12 and was a big part of the reality-conquering Weapons X team featured in it, being a sometimes leader of that team. As a Carnage-bonded sociopath, he was pretty powerful, but he was nonetheless sent to the afterlife by a blast from Firestar in Exiles number 44.
Number 4. Herald of Thunder. This version of Thor folks will be most familiar with, probably from the game Fortnite. But he's actually inspired by Donny Cates' current run on Thor, who exists in main continuity. So even if you're like, Herald of Thunder, that's a Fortnite thing. It's actually also a comics thing. Just like in the comics, Thor is convinced by Galactus to join up with him as a threat greater than Galactus is apparently on its way, known as the Black Winter. The Black Winter is literally a cosmic sort of, well, winter storm that in essence destroys everything it touches with its snowfall. So, like snow, but if it was like a whiteout for existence instead of just, small frozen bits of water. much worse than snow. In the game Fortnite, Thor agrees to join Galactus in his fight against Black Winter and becomes his Herald of Thunder, becoming imbued with the power cosmic.
At number 3 we have Weapon H. So this variant is the result of what happens when you mix together Wolverine and the Hulk into one guy. And what you get is a superpowered Hulk with an adamantium skeleton and of course the retractable claws. But he still has the ability to switch back to his human form on command despite his frame being coated in the metal. The only downside for this variant that I could think of is the same thing that gives the Hulk a disadvantage. His rage can sometimes be too much for him to handle, keeping him from making sound tactical decisions at times. But regardless, the sheer power that this variant holds is enough, as Dr. Alba theorizes, to kill every living thing on Earth. This is a relatively new character, so I'm interested to see where he goes. I guess we'll all see.
Number 2, Allfather Thor. While many people still say that Rune King Thor is one of the most powerful versions, and he definitely is, I think the real power lies in a potential alternate future version of Thor known as Old King Thor or Allfather Thor, or simply just as King Thor. Any of these names is acceptable and correct, so if you've heard someone say one and you're like, wait, which one is it? It's all, there's like literally 15 to 20 names actually this character goes by, so they're all right. This version of Thor was once believed to be the true future of Thor, but has since been relegated to kind of an alternate future, with him hailing from the possible future of Earth 14412. Although this Thor has alluded to the fact that if 616 Thor was to die, it would actually affect him, so not sure how connected they are still. In this reality, Thor would not only defeat Gore the God Butcher, Galactus, a souped up version of his brother Loki, a souped up version of Doctor Doom, and an even more powerful returning Gore the God Butcher, but he also at one point wielded the Phoenix Force. This all went down after Allfather Thor faced off against Old Man Phoenix, his friend Logan, who had become the host of that force. While Thor lost that fight, the two ended up teaming up together to save Earth from a version of Doom who was super power boosted by various artifacts and powers that he'd been collecting. In the end, Phoenix sacrificed himself to pass on the power of the Force to Thor so that he might stand a chance in defeating Doom, which he ultimately did. Number 1, Herald of None. Herald of None is technically the Thor we have in main continuity currently. This is a period in Thor's life where he basically took all of Galactus' power in order to defeat Black Winter, going from his Herald to kind of like renouncing Galactus and ultimately defeating him so that he might destroy the Black Winter, which threatened the existence of everything in the multiverse and the multiverse itself. Doing this allowed Thor to be successful in taking out Black Winter, reducing it to a mere snowflake, one single snowflake. This snowflake also allowed Thor a glimpse into a potential future when it melted on his hand, where he saw Thanos had returned, leading perhaps an army of undead Marvel heroes who were under his influence as he wielded an Infinity Stone encrusted version of Mjolnir. I don't know if we know yet about this future, when it's coming to pass, but I love when comics are like, look at this future, this could happen. I'm like, oh, I'm so excited. Give it to me, give me this future.